Welcome to SolarWorks for Illinois. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Today is January 28th, and it's my great pleasure to continue our conversation about community solar. Based on the FEJA bill that we got passed in 2016, we now have community solar in Illinois. There was a major procurement in 2019, and there are now 111 community solar projects in the adjustable block program that are going into the ground here in Illinois. And then there's an alternate universe known as Solar for All, which is also doing some community solar. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, community solar and Solar for All. It's my great pleasure to host on the show my friend and colleague, Jon Carson. And we're going to have a great conversation here in just a second. I've got to get the slide to move forward. Sometimes technology is our friend, sometimes it is not. I want to make a couple of announcements about upcoming webinars before we launch into the interview with Jon. All of these podcasts, upcoming and recorded, can be found at our website at cesnrg.com. That's a new URL. We rebranded in January, so it's cesnrg.com/podcast. And in February, we have Catherine Kanoy with C2 Energy Capital coming on the show to talk about corporates going solar. So look for that on February 25th. And then in March, my colleague Mark Thrum from Intelligent Generation is coming on to discuss solar plus battery storage, the case for Midwest manufacturing. And Intelligent Generation is a great partner of ours. We are doing many solar plus storage projects now. And so we will break that down for especially the Midwest. You know, when people think about solar and storage, they think about California or the New York market or the Massachusetts market, but we are doing solar plus storage here in Illinois. So join us in March for that. And with that, I want to introduce Jon Carson. Jon spent many years in the Obama administration, and he's a lifelong environmentalist. He's an engineer by training, but a grassroots organizer, fundraiser, and now solar developer. He started Trajectory Energy a couple of years ago, really with the advent of FEJA and the solar industry here in Illinois. And he's been through some trials and tribulations, as any solar developer worth his salt has been. So, Jon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Tim.
We tried to do this last year, and then the adjustable block procurement kind of knocked the wind out of you momentarily. I have to say you're a trooper for not just abandoning ship at that point in time, because that was a rough go. But tell us a little bit about how you got interested in solar and how you came to start Trajectory Energy Partners.
Absolutely, Tim. Again, thanks for having me on. It's exciting to be here in Illinois with all of this going on. The backstory is I grew up on a farm in western Wisconsin. Did go to school at UW-Platteville for civil engineering, and wanted to get involved in renewables right away. Wasn't a whole lot happening back in the late 1990s, early 2000s. Here in the Midwest. My summers, while I was in college, I actually worked at Vernon Electric Cooperative, a rural electric co-op that covered my area. At the time, Vernon Electric was 100% coal-fired. Went off into the political world for a while, did a bunch of different stuff in that world, but always wanted to get back to renewables. Finally got back to the private sector in 2014 when I joined SolarCity. I was there through the transition with the Tesla acquisition of SolarCity. And literally my last day at SolarCity was the day that the Future Energy Jobs Act passed. So just huge thank you to everyone who was back here in Illinois helping make that happen. We started Trajectory Energy Partners that spring, spent a good 2 years developing 30 projects that we put into the lottery for the adjustable block program all over the northern half of Illinois. But from the beginning of the law passing, as a company, we're really excited about Illinois Solar for All and worked to make sure we were developing projects for that program as well. So as you said, after running around the state, countless zoning hearings, dozens of great landowners we're working with, the lottery did not go well for us. We submitted 30 projects, probably statistically should have gotten 4 or 5 picked, but literally got 0. But having a background in politics, I always knew to prepare for a bad outcome. You never know what's going to happen. And had reserved a couple of projects that we were really focused on Illinois Solar for All. And when that first procurement happened in August of last year, one of our projects, Rockford Solar, a 2 megawatt community solar project, was picked.
Great. Thank you, John. And for our listeners, let's just break down what is community solar, especially in Illinois, and how does it differ in the adjustable block program versus the Solar for All program?
Absolutely. You know, community solar is an idea that was first developed in other states like Massachusetts and Colorado. The idea is that while many people are able to go solar on their own roof, or a school might be able to have solar on its roof or in a back couple acres that it owns for a behind-the-meter system, a lot of people don't have a behind-the-meter option to participate in a solar project. They live in an apartment, they have too many trees. School might have a roof riddled with air conditioning units and other reason it can't use its roof. So the idea with community solar is that we put projects of a certain size. Here in Illinois, they're limited to 2 megawatts AC, are put on the distribution grid, somewhere in that same distribution territory. And any electricity user can sign up as a subscriber to the community solar project. I think it's a really important program for a couple reasons. First of all, it fills, from a technical perspective, a donut hole that's in the middle. We need as many behind-the-meter systems as we can, as many 5 kilowatt systems on little roofs, and we need big utility scale projects. But frankly, our distribution grid here in Illinois is a resource, and community solar fits nicely onto that distribution grid. From an advocate perspective, I think it's really important that we create this cohort of community solar subscribers. Behind-the-meter customers are excellent advocates for the community solar world, but as we build out this universe of people benefiting from community solar as subscribers, I think they're going to be a really key voice in future legislation and expanding solar here in Illinois.
Yeah, community solar really democratizes solar, right? If you don't own your own roof or have a sunny roof, you can still get solar energy from a real project that you can go see if you really want to. The rules are quite liberal about geographic restrictions in Illinois. The community solar asset only needs to be in the same utility territory, so in ComEd, Mid-American, or Ameren. And then it can sell power via virtual net metering to any off-taker, whether that's a residence or a commercial off-taker. So that's a great framework. These are all 2 megawatt AC or 2.5 to 2.8 megawatt DC projects, generally speaking, in the Illinois market. They can be smaller, but the nature of development is such that you want to go as big as you can if you can go bigger. So why don't we talk about your Rockford project, John, because that's a real nice example of a community solar project that's in the Solar for All program. How did that project get started, and tell us a little bit about its evolution?
Absolutely. So as I said, from the moment we started Trajectory and the Future Energy Jobs Act had just passed, we really believed in the spirit of the intention of the Illinois Solar for All program, making sure solar was benefiting, as the program says, every community, all communities here in Illinois. Rockford was one of the first communities. We sat down with the team at the city. They actually already knew about Illinois Solar for All. They were already educated on solar and talked about a couple different properties they owned that they thought might be good for solar. One of those was the Horsman Quarry on the northwest side of Rockford. To me, it's really the definition of an environmental justice site, a site that has seen problems in the past from excess pollution, and that is really targeted by Illinois Solar for All. The site was an open pit gravel mine for over 80 years. When the gravel mine closed, it was an open pit municipal dump in the community. Lots of polluting industries gravitated to that part of Rockford. It was finally closed and capped in the 90s, but has been, 12 acres of land that the city had no use for, and really a great example of where solar can fit well. So we went through a 2-year process of working with the city on a lease, working with the city on an outreach program, all while the good folks at Elevate Energy were designing the details of the Illinois Solar for All program. So sometimes as a developer, you've got to be moving forward on a project before you know what the final rules are. And but because I think of the deep community engagement we'd done, when the final rules came out for Illinois Solar for All, instead of just a straight lottery like we saw with the regular program, Elevate implemented a scoring system, and that was how Rockford Solar ended up being picked.
Yeah, let's talk about that scoring system. That's quite a different system than the adjustable block program. I think the idea is that the higher quality projects will score higher, projects that are more likely to get across the finish line. There were complaints, for example, in the adjustable block program that some developers stuffed the pipeline with projects that wouldn't necessarily get across the finish line just to kind of take up bandwidth. So anyway, tell us a little bit about the scoring and how that served you.
First of all, it really emanated from the great work that have been done by so many environmental justice groups here in Illinois. The very fact that Illinois Solar for All is part of the Future Energy Jobs Act is because of that great network of advocates who are now working through the Illinois Solar for All Coalition. They made sure that this was included in the law. They also made sure that the program would focus on certain communities to really value community engagement. It is just a lot easier as a program administrator to say every project's equal and we'll just have a lottery. It was complicated for Elevate to implement this system, but I think they did a really good job. There was a scoring system that first really focused on geography. So making sure that environmental justice communities scored higher, low-income communities scored higher. Then there was a look at community engagement. In our case with the Rockford project, because we were able to get a letter of intent from a nonprofit or government sector anchor subscriber, extra points were scored as well that ended up making the difference. In the different subcategories of Illinois Solar for All, some of the behind the meter pieces, there's other factors such as points for minority and women-owned businesses, points for the size of the system, and some guardrails to really make sure that there's geographic diversity as well. The whole document is about 20 pages long. It's quite complicated, but I think you see in the results it did a good job in selecting projects really focused on the right areas and not just random selection.
And let's talk a little bit about the scope of the Illinois Solar for All program. It's been a little difficult for me to get my arms around how many projects, how many megawatts are we talking about? Can you address that?
Yeah, first of all, having worked in politics, there's an old saying about legislation that I can make it simple or I can make it fair, but I can't make it both. And I think that's really the truth about Illinois Solar for All, a lottery with every project being exactly equal, whether it's a bad place for solar or a wonderful place for solar. That's simple. People might not think it's fair. Illinois Solar for All is complicated. It's complicated in a number of aspects, but I think that this is a really important market segment, and it's a community that we don't want to have bad projects creating false hope. We don't want to have projects that are going to fail. So there are a lot of guardrails. First, around which projects are selected. Second, there was a lot more diligence done on the project submissions for Illinois Solar for All than there was for the regular adjustable block program. Finally, there's two other really important conditions that are not part of the regular program. One is around job training, making sure that these projects result in new opportunities for disenfranchised communities here in Illinois, tied to a whole set of job training programs that have been going on for the last couple of years. And then finally, also really importantly, there are guardrails around the savings that residents will see. The support, the REC contracts for these projects are higher and they're paid up front. And in return, the program requires guaranteed savings of 50% on the value of energy from these projects. So it is complicated, but not prohibitively so. Our team has spent a lot of time from the beginning involved in the many stakeholder sessions and working groups that Elevate put together to put this together.
So that is also one of the bottom lines here is the intention is for residents and business owners in Illinois to save money while also buying solar power. So 50% savings, that certainly grabs your attention. How does that work? How do people sign up for Illinois Solar for All? And is it on a project basis, or is it a program that you're, as a consumer, you're just putting your hat in the general ring?
So those requirements around savings run across the different programs, whether it's a behind-the-meter system for low-income housing, whether it's a behind-the-meter system for a larger nonprofit or community solar. You cannot have any upfront charge. You also have to have a guaranteed savings on the value of energy. So for a behind-the-meter system that gets the both distribution and generation credit, it's based off of that. For community solar, the community solar bill credit is only based on the energy supply. And so it's based off of that. Sometimes the way I describe it is our Rockford project as an example. It's producing kilowatt hours, but you can really think of them as coupons redeemable at the utility. And we sell those coupons for 50 cents on the dollar.
And how does somebody get involved, though? How does somebody become a subscriber?
So, I think one thing that has been a challenge here in Illinois with Illinois Solar for All, first of all, there's not a tremendous amount of funding. 2 procurements happened in 2019. There was enough funding for 2 projects, essentially 2 large projects out of each one, and that's what we saw. And with our Rockford project, for instance, our intention is to keep those subscribers in the Rockford area. We intend to reach out and work with local groups that are already working with targeted communities, such as Rockford Housing Authority. And so a lot of these really are going to be community driven like that. There is a good website. Illinois Solar for All has a website that if people are interested, they can see if they are income eligible and check it out. But I think, honestly, a lot of this is going to be driven by local communities that have worked with a developer to move a project forward like we have going on in Rockford.
So make note of that. Illinois Solar for All has a great website. You can just Google Illinois Solar for All, and you'll find that. And then some of the developers and financiers that are owning and operating projects. Like Nexamp, I know, has propped up a community solar website. So you'll find that also if you just Google community solar in Illinois, and then you can engage with those owner operators directly to become a subscriber. What else should we talk about with regards to Rockford, John? Where is that project now in development?
Yeah, so we've the first meeting we had with the city was way back in March of 2017. I would say one of the keys to the success of this program was what a great partner the city of Rockford has been. They really helped us overcome obstacles and have been a partner in this. The land is owned by the city, as well as Rockford Housing Authority. They are going to be the anchor subscriber for this project. We won the REC Award last fall. The interconnection work with ComEd has been moving along, and we've decided to partner with Nexamp, who will be the long-term owner-operator of the system. Trajectory will be doing the on-the-ground subscription work over the next year. So the plan is it will be constructed this year. We'll be working with our local partners to sign up subscribers, and we'll see that energy flowing onto the grid by the end of this year, and about 600 families will see reduced bills from this program by the end of 2020.
Wonderful. Yeah, so that 2017 to present, that gives you a sense. It is a multi-year process, generally, getting larger solar projects developed anywhere, but certainly in Illinois. And but these are going in the ground now. So you're going to start to see many 10 to 20 acre solar farms all around the state of Illinois. And we have a question from a listener, and anybody who wants to chat questions into the chat feature. There's a Q&A icon right there in your interface. So feel free to send us questions. If you're on the list of Solar for All projects, can you be bumped down from funding due to a newer project scoring more points? I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but what do you think about that question, John?
So again, the way one important feature of Illinois Solar for All is that there's a guaranteed stream of funding for the next 5 years. With the regular program, we had a big lottery in April of 2019, and none of us really know what the future looks like for those wait lists. With Illinois Solar for All, I think Elevate and the IPA smartly decided to take the limited funds that there were and spread them out over 7 procurements. There were 2 in 2019, and now there'll be 1 in each of the next few years, 2020 through 2024. And each of those procurements creates their own wait list. So while there was a procurement with a limited amount of funds, each procurement has its wait list, and those projects only move up in the wait list if one of the projects selected doesn't move forward. There'll be a new procurement in 2020 and on in out years, and with new rules. And I think that that's smart. You know, with the regular program, we have this long wait list, and I don't think anyone is really doing much to add to it for community solar. But with each of these new procurements, new projects can come in, which I think makes a lot of sense.
So if I understand this correctly, if you are waitlisted in a procurement in Solar for All, let's say in the 2019 you were waitlisted, then when there's a new procurement, you and others are then putting your hat in the ring and being ranked against one another. So when you're waitlisted, you're not guaranteed anything, right?
No. Correct.
Yeah. And just for some context, in the adjustable block program, which is, as I mentioned, a parallel universe, so it's a different program, but in that program where there's many more megawatts of solar, and ultimately that boils down to RECs and KWH, there are 111 projects that won RECs in the community solar program. over, I think, 800 were waitlisted. So there was a huge number of projects that developers had begun developing and actually had applied into the program with. So it means they have, lease agreements in place with landowners. They've done some initial permitting and maybe some very, very preliminary engineering. So anyway, those projects are waiting in the wings. Do you want to talk a little bit about wait lists, John? Because obviously you had a significant portfolio for the ABP that did not win RECs. What are your thoughts about those? Are you going to try to extend those lease agreements?
We absolutely are. We really focused on high quality sites. I think who knows exactly what the future looks like? Who knows what legislation we're going to pass? Who knows what financing looks like? But the one thing we do know is that a good site to build solar is going to be the same 5 years from now as it is now. If you've got a high quality site with a good interconnection spot, those are the sites that are going to get built in future years. And that's what we focused on at Trajectory with our partners, and believe that as we build out solar here in the Midwest, that will happen. It's just such a fascinating time right now. I mentioned first job I had when I was in college, other than baling hay, was working for my rural electric co-op, which at the time was 100% coal powered. If you've been watching the solar news at all in the last few weeks, Tri-State Electric, an enormous rural electric co-op in the Rocky Mountain region, announced that they're closing every one of their coal plants and switching. There'll be 50% renewables by 2025. Here we are wringing our hands in the great state of Illinois about, can we get to 25%? They just announced they're going to do it. And back in Western Wisconsin, where I grew up, Dairyland Power, the G&T, has announced they are closing their Genoa coal plant on the Mississippi River, right there where my grandpa used to take me fishing as a kid, will be closed next year. And so we're big believers in the future of solar here in the Midwest. The wait list is what it is. It's one mechanism that these projects might get built. But I think all of us solar advocates, solar developers, we all need to be pushing for the next round of policy here in Illinois to really get these quality projects built.
Well, let's spend a little time on the policy issue, because that is vital to really the overall state of solar in Illinois and of course the Midwest. I was at an event in Madison, Wisconsin recently, sponsored by Renew Wisconsin. There are 800 megawatts of solar projects that have been permitted in the state of Wisconsin. So while we're very excited about 2,800 megawatts, all of our neighbors have burgeoning solar programs and industries. Much of that is utility scale solar. I noted on previous shows that NIPSCO announced a 1,200 megawatt procurement in northern Indiana last fall. Those projects are going to get developed in the next 5 to 10 years. So yes, the utilities are starting to change the game and are game changers, but for there to be a DG market, we really need legislation across the board, I guess, whether I'm talking about DG or utility scale, we need legislation. So, to set the table a little bit, the Future Energy Jobs Act was a significant step forward in helping Illinois achieve its renewable portfolio standard, which says that Illinois will have 25% clean power on the grid by 2025. Our RPS, as we call these, was broken. It was underfunded. The amount of RECs for renewable energy was very sporadic and too small to really take a bite out of the grid. Now, with FEJA, theoretically, we were on target to get to 25% by 2025. Sometime last year, everyone realized that the $200 million a year that's flowing into RECs to fund wind and solar in Illinois was not adequate to achieve 25%. The number I've seen is 17%. So there is now a pending funding cliff where the REC money is going to dry up for a period of time. And We're all paying into this rec fund. Just know that, right? All ratepayers, residents, and business owners in Illinois, if you're in ComEd, Ameren, or Mid-American territories, are paying into the rec program. So what is going on legislatively, John, with FEJA Part 2, as I like to call it?
Absolutely. So we all know that if we want to keep expanding solar here in Illinois, we're going to need additional policy work. FEJA really kickstarted a lot of this, but it's not even going to be able to get us to that 25% by 2025 anymore. There's a lot of insanely detailed things you could dive into. There's a bill called the Path to 100 put forward by the industry. There's another bill called the Clean Energy Jobs Act. But I think to really take a step back, the fundamentals of the work we all need to do to get something done are, number one, to show those success stories. And there are going to be so many wonderful success stories in 2020. Projects are getting built, they're delivering savings, and we just need to be broken records showing those. Then we need to simply say, we want more of this. And without future legislation, this great work is going to stop. And finally, it's really important that we do solar the right way. I think Illinois Solar for All is an example of making sure this is a program that benefits everyone. I think sometimes, the details are incredibly important, but in order to get the details right, we need really loud voices on the outside demanding a solution. I think that it's really a moment for our new governor, Governor Pritzker, to step up and lead this. I think that it is a promise that he made on the campaign. I think we've seen tremendous leadership from other new governors all across the country. Illinois is now one of the only states left that has full control from one party, in our case, the Democrats, that has not advanced a big new bill. Colorado is moving forward. Nevada is moving forward. And I suspect that Governor Pritzker is planning to take up that leadership mantle that's really going to be required here. And we all need to be cheering that on, demanding it, and showing these success stories that are going to happen all this year.
I'm glad you mentioned Governor Pritzker. I hope he's listening and watching these recordings, because we really do need leadership at the top, because we do have two pieces at least of significant energy legislation now in the ones that you mentioned with the PATH and the Clean Energy Jobs Act. We need to reconcile those, and it really is a both-and world. CEJA is arguing for a 100% RPS. The Path to 100 is arguing for a 40% RPS. Those are both noble and great goals. They're going to create a lot of clean jobs. We were running over 100 electricians in solar last summer. So these are high-paying, high-quality, good benefits jobs. And anybody getting into the energy industry now has a 50-year run. The globe and the United States are going to make the transition. The forces of capitalism are on our side now, right? So this is a highly profitable industry, and coal and gas and nuclear assets don't last forever. They have to be eventually retired. And now you can make clean power from wind and solar more cheaply than any other source of power. And that is what is really driving the growth of renewables globally. So I will also note that it was very eye-opening how quickly the governor got the marijuana bill passed in the new year, right, at the beginning of 2019. And energy was clearly not a priority. So now the question is, will energy be a top priority for the governor's office? Obviously, you and I think it should be. What else is going on that our listeners can take action on?
Here's how I would encourage your listeners to think about this. First of all, solar is going to win. Solar will dominate energy production here in Illinois eventually, one way or another. The question is, do we want to be leaders or not? We do a lot of work in the Peoria area. We work with communities and landowners who are literally surrounded by coal plants that are closing. I have not met anyone who thinks we can reverse that. The coal plants are closing. Renewables are dominating new energy construction. We're going to win. Those market forces you described will eventually make this happen. The question is, do we want to wait another 5-10 years for that in Illinois, or do we want to be leaders? And that really is the question we all have to ask Governor Pritzker. I think what we can do on a day-to-day basis is, first of all, celebrate every success that's happening in 2020 because of the Future Energy Jobs Act. We intend to do that with our partners on Rockford Solar. I think every developer should, whether it's a 10 kilowatt system on a small church or a megawatt project for a school, we need to celebrate every project that happens, make clear that this is all going to end if this doesn't, if we don't see further legislation, and challenge the governor to take up that leadership mantle. He's gotten so many great things done on so many other issue areas. I think 2020 is the year for this and his team on renewables.
Well, let's hope so, because if we don't get additional legislation in Illinois, we are going to have a funding cliff. It's not the end of the world. Those $200 million are still flowing into the market every year. It's just that they get used up a little faster than they're able to fund projects. So there will be a 1 or 2 year delay now, sometime next year, for additional RECs into the marketplace if we don't get additional legislation. So it is an all hands on deck. If you're in the Illinois solar industry or a consumer interested in Illinois solar growing the clean energy economy, please go to path100.net. That is one way to take action. You can also send letters to your legislators through that path100.net website. And of course, reach out to the governor's office directly and let his office know that you care about clean energy and clean jobs in Illinois. That's the bottom line. He needs to hear from us. We have a question from a listener. Kim says, is Trajectory working in the Solar for All DG subprogram or have plans to?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this, Kim. So originally, our focus for Illinois Solar for All was just community solar. There are other subcategories, one for behind-the-meter systems for nonprofits, one called distributed generation. It's really focused on low-income housing. Interestingly, there was literally not enough projects that were submitted and made it through the process to use up the funding initially in the procurements for those two subcategories. Seeing that and seeing how important the success of Illinois Solar for All is to advancing solar here in Illinois, Trajectory is now working on both of those subcategories. We are working on the larger end of the behind-the-meter programs and working with a number of both nonprofit and government sector housing entities to really try to figure out the distributed generation portion. I think those of us who care about this program, it's going to be hard to ask for more funding for Illinois Solar for All if we can't spend the money that was already put into it. So that is absolutely something Trajectory wants to be a part of. I think as we start to do a lot of work on subscriptions this year, I think a lot of that will go hand in hand. We intend to stay very focused on Illinois Solar for All and really appreciate that there are these future procurements over the next few years.
Jon, can you say what types of entities make good candidates for DG Solar for All?
So first of all, whether it's DG, behind the meter, or community solar, the number one thing is you have to have a committed partner. I think that's why we were successful with the city of Rockford. We're now working on some distributed generation and behind the meter programs where at the end of the day, there's a champion over on the customer side who really wants to make this happen. From there, it's just a question of what does the interconnection situation look like? What does the land availability look like? But fundamentally, actually, the first thing we really look for is there going to be that great partner on the other side of this program. I think that's how we're going to get through some of the challenges to make these projects work.
Great. And we have another question, and please type your questions in. We're going to wrap up here in the next 10 minutes or so. So if you have questions, this is a great opportunity to talk to an expert in both the Solar for All and community solar arenas. Amani asks, will you be able to develop a white paper citing best practices?
Yeah, so there was so much thought that was put into the details of Illinois Solar for All. I really do, again, thank all the advocates who've been working on this for years before Future Energy Jobs Act passed. One of those pieces was that there is a pool of funding for grassroots educators as part of this, and a number of groups all across the state have received, very small grants to do that great work. There's a group called Sustain Rockford up in Rockford who's doing that grassroots educating. The Ecology Action Center in Bloomington. We really think they are we're working closely with them to share these best practices, and I think their voice is the right one for that, working with Elevate, and we'll keep working with those grassroots groups to do that.
And how will you get the word out about that once that's done? Is that through the coalition that you mentioned?
Yeah, if anyone listening isn't aware of it and would like to be a part of it, the Illinois Solar for All Working Group, led by both Levejo, Juliana Pino, and Milena Hessel at ELPC, have really done a fantastic job, along with Naomi Davis and others, folks all across the state, to really help shepherd this policy, both from getting it into law and getting it implemented the right way. Working with them and many of those grassroots education organizations, I think we're really going to have a story to tell here in Illinois, and hopefully with future legislation, take it all to the next level.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned some of those EJ grassroots organizations. Levejo is the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization in the city of Chicago, great organization, and they're very active in Solar for All now. And then ELPC is the Environmental Law and Policy Center. They do all kinds of legal activism around the Great Lakes on clean water, clean air, and clean energy. So we're grateful to our friends at ELPC. And then you mentioned Naomi Davis and her organization, Blacks in Green, also in Chicago. Naomi has been a friend to clean energy for many, many years now, and is a wonderful grassroots organizer and activist and trainer. So just to answer a couple more of Amani's questions, bringing this work to other places. Of course, the Sierra Club is a great organization, and you can just connect with any of the Sierra Clubs here in Illinois, and bring that to Missouri and Kansas, as you asked. And then transcripts of this recording. We do post these recordings on YouTube, and there is a transcript feature. So there will be an automatic transcript made, and you can copy and paste that from the YouTube. And you can find all of our recordings on our website at cesnrg.com/podcast. So, John, in the closing minutes here, barring new legislation, what are your priorities as a solar developer in the next, say, 6 to 24 months?
Well, we are, I grew up here in the Midwest. I like to say that when I worked for SolarCity, I would drive down 294 to go to O'Hare and fly off to California and work on solar. After the Future Energy Jobs Act passed, I get to drive down 294 and go to great communities like Rockford, Peoria, and Kankakee to work on solar. So our team in Trajectory, we're based here in Illinois. We're not going anywhere. If there is no legislation, we will continue to work on Illinois Solar for All, and we're already preparing for that inevitable day where solar gets built, even if we don't see leadership from Governor Pritzker and the legislature here in Illinois. That will be unfortunate. It will be an awful lot slower. A lot of our neighbors will pass us. So I think all of us who want this opportunity for Illinois to be a leader, and let's be honest, there aren't a tremendous amount of issues we have a history of being leaders on. This is really one that's within our grasp. And so we at Trajectory will also be working with the team at ICEA and in others to keep showing the successes that are happening this year, making clear people understand that this is going to be one of those roller coasters and will hit a solar cliff without legislation, and preparing for the future on that.
And we have a comment from Leslie McCain. I'm glad you're listening, Leslie. Leslie is the executive director of ICEA, the Illinois Solar Energy Association. She points out that there is a Path 100 lobby day on February 26th. So that's just about in a month. And there's a social with legislators the evening before that on the 25th. You can learn about this at the ICEA website, illinoissolar.org, I believe is the ICEA website, or just Google Illinois Solar Energy Association. So thanks for pointing that out, Leslie. I want to make a couple of announcements about upcoming shows, and my tech failed me at the beginning, but here we are. Upcoming events, we have February 25th with Catherine Kanoy. We're talking about corporates going solar. Catherine worked for Walmart in their renewable energy division for many years, so we'll hear about what's going on in the Midwest with large corporates going solar. Then in March, we're breaking down solar plus battery storage, the business case for Midwest manufacturers with Mark Thrum of Intelligent Generation. And then a look behind the curtain at C&I Solar. In April, we have Colin Murphy, who is the owner and president of Simmons Knife and Saw, coming on. Colin is a customer of ours at Continental, and we're going to be talking about his company's decision to install a 437 kW rooftop array in Glendale Heights in the Chicago suburbs. So for anybody considering behind the meter solar, this is a great look at how executives and companies approach these projects and what it takes to get them across the finish line. I do want to thank everybody for coming on today and for all of your support and ideas. Please do reach out to me at tmontague@cesnrg.com or on Twitter, tgmontague on Twitter. And again, thank you, Jon, for coming on the show. It's great to discuss community solar and solar for all. I really appreciate your time. And until next time.
All right. Thanks, Tim. And thanks for all the work you do too.
Have a great day, everybody.